welcome to the Undercovers football podcast. I'm Ben, along with Connor and Paul, and tonight we have a championship round edition. The Bills pulling off a little bit of history. Correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but first 10-0 season at home in franchise history
Yes,
after winning.
first time the Bills have gone 10-0 in their history of playing home games at
Now, did they
Highmark
win
Stadium.
all their preseason games at Highmark? Because if they did, that would be an extra cherry on top. I can't
They did
remember.
not, no.
Okay, that's right. Well,
I
shoot.
sat through the Chicago blowout.
Oh yes, that's right. Anyways, but at least the games that counted, the Bills took care of business at home, and now that leads them back to Arrowhead. I think this is Mahomes and Allen's ninth matchup in the past 5 seasons, which is
Yeah.
just frankly unheard of for teams that don't share a division. Fourth time in the playoffs. Allen obviously has the 4-1 advantage over Mahomes in the regular season, but he's still trying to get over that hope in the or hump in the postseason.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We had a last week the Bills avoided 4 straight divisional losses. This week the Bills are trying to not lose to Mahomes for the 4th straight time to
Well, it won't
Mahomes
be
in the
four.
playoffs.
It won't be four consecutive years because if you remember, they lost to Burrow,
That
but
is
it
true.
is the fourth time they would have lost to Mahomes in a
4
postseason.
kind of still the same way.
Yeah. But either way, you want to get over that hump eventually. Look, I said I was happy just getting back to the championship game, which we haven't been
Yeah.
to in 4 seasons, and we kind of been stuck in this divisional round as of recently. But damn it, I want more now. I want that Super Bowl. It is so close, for the taking.
I know.
We've gotten close to beating Kansas City in the playoffs before. Now they're obviously on a mission too, and they're playing for history. We're playing for history, and I mean even over on the NFC side, which I mean I guess we'll get to that matchup. Possibly if the Bills are able to pull it off in Arrowhead, but between the championship football and the NFL, the championship game in college, this is both some of the best times and worst times of the year because
Yeah.
you have these epic games that matter, and then it just means football is ending, and we have to wait another, you know, 5 months or whatever till training camp, 6 months or
Yeah.
whatever till preseason.
Yeah.
Um, and for the college side, as I get into my quick takes, it's also the worst in my opinion because the last it seems like all of the last several national championship games have been blowouts. Like none of them have been close. Um, and I actually posted something about this on X last night, which is it's gonna be kind of a quick and hot take. As nice as it is to get all these extra games, I don't really think the playoff format, other than last night, when you had a seventh seed win it hasn't really made that much of a difference because the games are still blowouts either way. You may as well just go back to the classic BCS where you had the crystal football, you had all these epic bowl games, even though there were some great bowl games this year outside of the college playoff, but there's really only three of the playoff games that were actually good. If you just maybe four, I guess, because you had both semifinal games. No, just really three then. So I don't know. Like it's nice. They do it for money purposes, of course, but I kind of miss the old college football. Then, especially with the transfer portal, NIL. And that's why, as much as I said that college regular season is arguably better than the NFL playoffs, it is simply not close, in my opinion. The NFL playoffs are the cream of the crop, in my opinion, for sports as far as postseasons go. The only one that I really enjoy almost as much as baseball, but I still enjoy football more. But yeah, that's just my quick take today. That um, the playoffs really haven't really added to the entertainment value overall. Yeah, it's cool to see a lower seed win, but let's be honest. Most of the time in the at least the 14 playoff system, anyways, it was the 1 or 2 team that won it, and I really don't expect that to change, other than this year where you kind of had a little bit of a fluke where Ohio State, lost a couple games and then ultimately won it. But let's hear your quick take of the day, Connor.
All right. Yeah, let's see. I will actually wind up shifting gears. I'm going to actually go with what Paul wrote down on the list wherever he went. He seems to have disappeared on us. But he had written down here, what is the biggest priority for Ben Johnson in Chicago, which I actually think that's quite the take. And I like that he kind of gave me this one because I had a very interesting thought on Ben Johnson leaving Detroit to go to Chicago. You remember last year when everybody was thinking Ben Johnson would take the job with the Washington Commanders, but he didn't. And now look at where the Washington Commanders are in the NFC Championship game where nobody thought they'd be. And now he's going to Chicago to go assist Caleb Williams and maybe make him into what Jaden Daniels is now, which everybody has a lot higher expectations for Caleb Williams, obviously, because he was that guy, first overall pick.
Right.
And the Bears aren't a bad team. The Bears are actually a pretty good team. They were 4-2 at one point, looked really good, and then just kind of fell apart.
And then it was actually that Hail Mary against
Mhm.
Washington, ironically, that was a
Yep.
dagger in them, and they lost
They lost a
10,
whole lot of games.
10 or
Yeah.
11 straight after that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that was
it
brutal.
went down south after their hearts got ripped out by Washington. And I think the whole point of Ben Johnson going to Chicago is going to be to make sure that doesn't happen again. You got to get Caleb Williams a line that can block for him. He was sacked so many times. I think he was one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league
If
in the
not the
regular season
most.
last
Yep.
year. Yeah, I don't know if he was the most, but I think he was like up there. If he
Mm,
wasn't the most, he was like second or third at least. Like he was sacked a lot. His O line's bad. It couldn't get any kind of protection for him to actually sit in the pocket. It wouldn't open the lanes for any of the running backs. I mean, when you have a great receiving core and you have a good tight end in Cole Kmet, I mean, you got to be able to have more of a team around him too. I mean, you got to be able to block for him. I mean, look at where the Chiefs are 15-2 literally because Mahomes has a top tier O line on top of a top tier defense. Those are the two biggest keys to a championship aside from a quarterback. So, big thing is for Ben Johnson in Chicago, I don't know what they'll do in terms of control over the roster, but if they give him control over the roster, then they have to give him the ability to draft whoever he wants on the O line and maybe even potentially get a star running back in the backfield to maybe get something like a Devon Achane or just something like that. They need a bit of a boost out of the backfield. I forget who the starting running back for them is right now, but if they're
DeAndre Swift.
he's good, but it's not
Yeah.
like he's not great.
He's not like a game changer.
No, he's not.
I just fact checked it. They were the most sacked team, by the way, and I agree
Figures.
with you on Ben Johnson coming over from Detroit. He should know that they had weapons there, don't get me wrong, but the success of that offense was ultimately engineered by that O line, having one of the best O lines in football. Now, obviously, he gets something that he didn't have in Detroit, which is a quarterback with some mobility, but it's still imperative to keep Caleb Williams upright so he doesn't, go down that David Carr path or, whatever we've seen. We've seen young quarterbacks get ruined by taking too many hits and just their internal clock and pocket presence is completely destroyed. I like what they're doing as far as the staff. I think Dennis Allen is about as good of a get as you can get to coach up the defense. So now Ben Johnson can, just have to worry about what he's good at, which is getting the offense right. And obviously, as good as Daniels is, if Ben Johnson, you knew he was holding out for a certain job, and I think it was the Chicago job. He might think that Caleb Williams still, at the end of the day, has more potential than Jaden Daniels, as good as Jaden Daniels has been playing, but he must see something in Caleb that because otherwise, I don't think if he really didn't love Caleb Williams' potential, I don't think he would have taken that job, and he might have just waited another season and gone back to Detroit. But I agree with you completely, Connor. I mean, I'm interested to seeing how this team, is Chicago Bears team, kind of is built up overall over the next couple years. Hopefully, obviously, they prioritize the O line, but let's get into our game recap for the Bills divisional round win over Baltimore. It was definitely a gutsy win. What stood out the most in the Bills divisional round matchup? Now there's definitely a couple things you could go with here, but to me, I think the most surprising thing is that Josh Allen only had 147 yards of total offense. He did still score 2 touchdowns, but the offense was able to put up 27 points, and some of that was aided by turnovers, short fields, whatever. Von Miller nearly running a touchdown back. But I think the fact that the Bills proved that they can finally win a playoff game without Josh Allen being the reason they win a playoff game is a very good thing for this team going forward, because the past 5+ years that the Bills were in the playoffs, they've needed Josh to completely carry the team, and the fact that they were able to win a game with Josh having arguably his worst playoff game he's had as far as the numbers go. I mean, obviously he played winning football. He didn't turn it over. He made throws when he needed to, but just from a statistical output, and I think according to PFF, it was his worst playoff game since either 2020 or 2021. So, I mean, from a a grading standpoint, it wasn't the best game, but obviously the most important thing is the win. So to me, I think my biggest takeaway is obviously they finally were able to prove they could win a playoff game without Josh having to put on the cape. And obviously we know when he has to, he will put that cape on and become Superman. But I saw this analogy from someone else. I don't exactly remember who it was. Otherwise, I'd credit them. But they won the game with Josh Allen just being Clark Kent. And I think that's dangerous for the rest of the league.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. And the whole point of the entire question, the whole answer is literally predicated in what you just said. Josh Allen won the game without having to be Superman, and that is terrifying. Because let's really think about this from what we've already seen in the playoffs from Josh Allen so far. Wild card round against the Broncos, he really didn't have that spectacular playoff game either. The team did the heavy lifting against the Ravens in the divisional round in an even more, open way. The team did the heavy lifting, not Josh Allen. You know how really good that is, because you got to remember the reason the Bills have been beaten in the divisional round every single time is not because of Josh Allen. It is because the defense and or special teams has collapsed when they needed to show up. So the fact that they have not only not collapsed, but they've actually been the reason that the Bills have won, that says something. And that also leads into the fact that if Josh Allen does need to go nuclear in a playoff game, I don't think anybody in the league stands a chance. Out of anybody that's left, obviously we got the Chiefs this week, but hypothetically, if they make it to the Super Bowl against either the Eagles or the Commanders, if Josh has to go nuclear, I don't think either team stands a chance. But the hypotheticals can wait for another day. Obviously, I only want to talk about the Chiefs. Talking about the Super Bowl ahead of time makes you sound like a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and how they would always talk about getting back at New England without realizing that they had to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. So that's
one step at a time.
That's what I try to tell everybody, especially you there, Pool Noodle, and you've taken very well into what I've told you. Because now you're finally like, okay, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Let's get back on track. Finally. Now you're not speculating as much. And I love that. But the point is, what I really want to see in particular, I don't want to see Josh Allen go nuclear. I want to see James Cook go nuclear. I want to see this run game just take off to a complete other level. As a matter of fact, I want to see Ty Johnson and Ray Davis all go nuclear in their own ways. heaven forbid, I am not about to say we get rid of James Cook in the offseason, because if anything, I would actually rather extend him immediately.
Well, speaking of that, I did see a storyline from Ian Rappaport that the team
Yes.
is actually talking with Cook's representatives about a long-term extension.
Good.
So he could be cooking for a long time. And just quickly, I normally am
Good.
not for paying the running back, but when the Bills
Neither am I.
really don't have any skill position players, obviously outside of Knox, making big money, and the importance I believe James Cook is to the Bills offense overall, I think they should pay him. You also got to
Yep.
consider he doesn't have the wear and tear a lot of these other star running backs have, because he didn't really tote the rock a lot in college. So I think Cook is a different case, and I just think his importance is critical. But let's hear your biggest takeaway from that game, Paul.
Yeah, real quick
Kinda-
though, before you do say that, Paul, there was one thing that I also wanted to add in, just really, really quickly, to Ben's take of usually not paying a running back, but this time you would. The other reason why it's very important, look at what Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, and Saquon Barkley are all doing right now with other teams who did pay for their services. It's now more important that you pay. If you've got a running back that's a star like James Cook, you keep him. And absolutely don't let him go to another team that will pay for his services, only to have him run all over you when it matters most. So keep James Cook in the building at all costs. Shoot, if you
I
got to bring in Dalvin Cook
1000%
on the
agree.
practice squad, bring him in on the practice squad to have him help out. But
I mean, I'm kind of on the same lines as you guys, but I'm just going to say this in a different way. The Bills really had a run first mentality in this game against the Ravens. You
as
know,
they should have.
weather probably played a somewhat of a factor into this. It was cold. It was still snowing for most of the game. So, running the football was, definitely a priority for the Bills in this game. I think they ran it 31 times. Josh Allen only threw it like 20 times. So, there was a sizable difference between passing the football and running the football. And then it goes down to, this even shows, actually the Bills ran the football 36 times on Sunday. So, that's a number that you normally don't hear out of old traditional Bills offenses of the past, of running the football in a playoff game 36 times. It's normally the other way around, where it's Josh Allen throwing the football 36 times, and he has everyone on his shoulders. Uh, his pants are all sawed up, and his elbows are bleeding. That's the Josh Allen we've been seeing in the playoffs. But now it's all has come together, and it's really has just formed into a really good, fun offense to watch. It is very strategic in a way where we're gonna run you to the ground, but we're also going to use Josh Allen and the weapon he brings with his arm and his legs is just all together as just combined into one really powerful offense. And that really what stood out to me on Sunday, because Shakir was the most targeted wide receiver on the entire Bills. The next guy that had the most targets was, I think, Matt Collins, and he had like 3 targets.
Hold on. Let me actually fact check you on that one really quickly, Paul. In terms of targets, Khalil Shakir had 7. James Cook had 3 in the past game. Matt Collins had 2.
Yeah. So out of the next receiver was Matt Collins.
Exactly. And
Next wide receiver, not target. But let's let's move on to the second half. Definitely saw a slightly different game plan. The Bills obviously entered the halftime with a very comfortable lead, and it did dwindle away, but ultimately they were able to come out on top with a victory. But is that conservative approach something that we like to see out of the Bills offense? I'll just start by saying nope, absolutely not. You got lucky against Baltimore that they had to press, but against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, you cannot afford, and then obviously in the Super Bowl, you cannot afford to have the Atlanta Falcons Super Bowl game plan when they played the New England Patriots. Even if you have a lead, I still think you should be passing. You should be staying aggressive. ultimately McDermott made the right decision, in my opinion, when he took the field goal on that 4th and goal. Now, had Joe Brady called the correct play on that 3rd and goal, which I think he should have called a tush push instead of that shotgun run for Allen, whatever option play he tried, I maybe would have considered a tush push if it was 4th and 1 from the 1-yard line, but obviously from the 3-yard line, that was just completely out of the cards. But to me, Joe Brady needs to, have call a complete game. The next 2 games, if the Bills want to reach their ultimate goal. So, I would say definitely not. It's not something I like to see at all.
Oh, heaven forbid heaven forbid Joe Brady gets a look by some of these other teams as a head coach when he can't even call a complete game. How preposterous. Why would anybody want this guy? Like, come on now. You really want Joe Brady to go right from the Bills, not even able to call a complete game and go try to coach a team? Come on now. What's wrong with all of y'all? No way he should be a head coaching candidate, if you know what I mean. But anyway, off of the little fun jabs, which they're not even jabs, that's the joke going around about Joe Brady. But no, what I was going to say a second ago as well is, you know what this team still to this day reminds me of? I had said it a while ago on the show. I don't know if anybody remembers, but I had said a long time ago on this show that this team actually really, really reminded me of the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers with how they ran their offense and with how they were able to make the plays where it mattered most. The only difference is that team was able to make special teams plays consistently. We really don't, but we don't really need to because we have Josh Allen and that freak of nature he is with his ability to use his legs. Ben Roethlisberger in his prime, he didn't have those legs. Only thing he had was the ability to throw an absolutely accurate dime wherever he needed to throw it. Josh isn't really going to do that, but he's going to run you over in the process. So, to the point of the actual topic, the conservative approach, I am going to disagree with Ben. I think we actually need to keep that up because the minute you start getting overly aggressive and the defense adjusts to compensate for that overly aggressive game plan, if you can't go right back to a conservative mindset and slow the pace of the game down, that's what leads to turnovers, that's what leads to mistakes, and that's how you lose.
My only
So,
counter to that is the Bills have had a historic season when it comes to protecting the ball, and they've
now
been
that I will agree with.
aggressive. They've had an aggressive approach throughout the season. So
Mhm.
to me, I'm not changing my philosophy. I'm still doing what got me there to get over the finish line. And it's been being aggressive, dialing up shots, letting Josh make his superhero plays, and
Mhm.
still taking care of the football.
Oh yeah,
Meanwhile, so I slightly
for
have to
sure.
disagree, but I'm interested to hearing Paul's take on this.
I mean, hey, there's both sides to each story. So I might have
Yep.
disagreed with you in one way, Ben, but I will agree with you in many, many others. Like keep your foot on the gas at all times. But let's
The
hear what
interesting
Paul's going
thing
to say.
about this is, the Bills' run game, even though it looked good at times, and the other times it didn't look good. I believe the Bills averaged 4.1 yards a carry in that game, which is about average or slightly above average, right in the average to above
Hmm.
average range.
4.1 yards per carry
So,
across everybody.
yeah. So it's right around there. So maybe that's why he kind of dialed it back for a minute. Maybe it was the established run. But I'm going to agree here with Ben is that even though you were up 11 at halftime, you're up 21-10 at halftime. You got the ball to start the second half. You could have gone up 3 scores in that before the Baltimore Ravens would have touched the football next. Like that just changes the entire game plan for the Ravens because if the Ravens probably coming into the second half was like, okay, if we stop them here, we could still run these sets of plays. Well, if the Bills go up 3 scores, all these plays that we could use on this drive to try to get back into this football game go away, and now turns into Lamar Jackson having to save the Baltimore Ravens, which at that point I don't think the Ravens would do anything. The Bills had 3 punts in across the entire game. Both of them came in the second half. Both of them were both punts were on the Bills' first 2 drives of the second half that totaled of 19 yards. That allowed the Ravens to get back into this football game. Like, if the Bills would have scored at least one on one of their first two drives, I don't think we're talking about a 2-point victory for the Bills. I think we're probably talking an 8 or possibly a 10-point victory for the Buffalo Bills heading into this week against Kansas City, because the Bills let off the gas. They allowed the Ravens to get back into this football game, and you can't do that, especially going up against the Chiefs. If you had an 11-point lead against the Chiefs this weekend heading into halftime, and you allowed the Chiefs back into the football game, Travis Kelce probably 9 times out of 10, 9 times and a half out of 10, out of 10, it's catching that football to tie the football game. Or in that case, that's to win the football game. You can't allow yourselves to get into this mindset, okay, we're up a few scores, let's get comfortable here and just start running the clock out. You still have 30 minutes of game left. You go for the win, you go for the dominance. And maybe after you're up 3 scores, you get the stop, okay, then maybe you start dialing back just a little bit so you can start wasting that time. But they weren't, on those first 2 drives, they weren't effectively moving the football down the field to say, let's play conservative football.
Now let's wrap up with our divisional round recap by giving our players of the game.
Oh boy.
So I really want to give Spencer Brown player of the game again. I think he deserves it, but I'll switch it up just because I already gave Spencer his props last week. But I'm going to go with Daquan Jones. I mean, he's a player we've kind of been calling out for most of the year, and I think this was his best game by far. He stepped up at the highest moment. That play he made, I think it was maybe second quarter, when he just pushed Tyler Linderbaum back into Lamar, and it forced Lamar to, instead of trying to hand it off to Derrick Henry, he then had to take a sack, and that resulted in a 4-yard loss. And later on in that play sequence, Linderbaum had a bad snap, but because they were already backed up, they were in a passing situation, and that's what led to the Hamlin sack, forced fumble. Von Miller ended up running it back. I mean, the run defense held Derrick Henry to 21 yards in the first half. I mean, he still had 84 on the game. So second half, the Ravens made their adjustments, but still, I think if, anyone were to tell us before the game that we were to hold Derrick Henry to 84 yards, I think we all would have signed up for that. So I'll still take it, but I that was just a huge point of the game that really shifted the momentum, and the Bills were able to coast into halftime after that moment, and just that helped them hang on at the end. So Daquan Jones is my player of the game.
All right. I like it, Ben. You got a really good point. I mean, Daquan Jones definitely did have himself a nice game. 2 total tackles, 2 solo tackles, but they came at good points when they needed to. Paul, I actually want you to go next. I think mine is going to surprise a lot of people. So I want Paul to go next so we can get the shock value right
All
at
right.
the very end. But unless Paul happens to say who I'm going to say, which I'd bet 2,000 to 1 he's not going to say.
I had 2 players written down just in case one of my players were taken, because the Bills defense was really the standout of this football game. And the guy that I'm going to choose out of the 2 was the player of the game that we chose for our post on Sunday, which was Damar Hamlin. I mean, he led the team in tackles on Sunday, but he had one of the most momentum swinging plays in the entire game, other than the oh my goodness, the Bernard fumble. That first forced fumble that he forced, that Von Miller would go on to recover and take it almost the distance of the field, and the Bills would have scored on that next play, on that drive, just really set tone for the rest of the football game. Believe the Bills were up. I don't know the correct score on that play. I don't know if it was 14-7 Bills or something like that, but the Bills were able to either add on to their lead or get the lead at that point. I don't remember the full score, but it switched the game. The Bills got pressure on that play with Damar Hamlin coming on from a safety blitz that we normally see out of this Bills defense once in a while, where they will bring the safety on a blitz. They used Matt Milano a few times on a blitz, so they brought different guys to generate pressure, and that allowed the Bills to say, okay, we can get pressure on Lamar Jackson, and when Jackson gets pressure, we know we can fluster him. And Hamlin held the back end while Taylor Rapp was out.
Oh,
when
yes.
Taylor Rapp was out, Cole Bishop came in. Yeah, there was one play where you kind of sit here and say, okay, what is Hamlin doing right now? But after that one head scratching play from Damar Hamlin, you're like, okay, he's locked in. Now he's the guy the Bills have to rely on because Taylor Rapp is out and he stood his own.
Mm-hmm. Paul, real quick, look at this comment by David here. How do you spell Super Bowl? That's how. I like it. I really
I
do.
like it.
This is exactly how
Like
you
it.
spell Super Bowl.
One game at a time, David. One game at a
forget
time.
the Bills at the end, but hey, I like it anyway. But all right, my turn for my player of the game, and the reason why I wanted to go last is because I knew Paul wasn't going to say it. Wait, who was your second player, just in case the first one was taken already?
Oh,
So
it
you
was
said
Bernard.
DeMar Hamlin. Who was it?
My second one was Bernard.
Okay, yeah, that would have fit. But let me bring you guys back really quickly and discuss something that I really haven't seen anybody talk much about yet. And that is, I know I mentioned a little bit of it earlier regarding special teams, but I didn't really talk about Buffalo's special teams in general. The last couple of times that we've been in the playoffs and we've been in the situation where we need, something to go right, it usually goes wrong on special teams. But I just had to give a quick shout out to the man himself, the legend, and my player of the game, Tyler Bass. Tyler Bass went 2 for 2 on field goals, 3 for 3 on extra points, and hit a 51-yard field goal in that kind of weather conditions. Remember last year where, he missed, and that was the whole reason, that was part of the reason why the Bills got sent home in the divisional round. This Tyler Bass is locked in. Like, he seems ready to go. And that is going to pay dividends, especially on that fourth down where McDermott made the right call and kicked the field goal to go up by 8. Because as we saw, Baltimore drove right back down the field, scored, and they failed the 2-point conversion on a play that we've actually seen them attempt before on many occasions. And 2 times in the past, Mark Andrews has dropped the ball in that same situation. I think both times it was against the Pittsburgh Steelers, or at least one of those times it was against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But they seem to do the same thing every time. But at the end of the day, a locked in Tyler Bass, and a Tyler Bass who's been playing basically perfect football throughout the playoffs, is going to be huge. And as far as winning games goes, you can't always score a touchdown on every drive. And if you get within field goal range, it's better to have a reliable kicker. And Tyler Bass has definitely turned into that. Quite the redemption story from last season. So that's why Tyler Bass is my personal player of the game. And hopefully he keeps up the performance because he has been absolute fire in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, 100%.
That's my
I
kicker right
I
there.
actually like that pick. You don't normally think of the kicker, when
Nope.
you're doing your player of the game, but I actually really like that pick, Connor. Now let's get into, what everyone's been waiting for, which is our AFC Championship preview. The Bills are going to their first AFC
Oh,
Championship game since 2020 season, which obviously happened in 2021, but that was 4 years ago. It was also an Arrowhead. Since then, obviously, the Chiefs have kind of cemented their status in NFL history as a dynasty, winning 2 more Super Bowls, and now have a chance to cement it even further um, with a three-peat. So the Bills are basically the one team that stands in between the Chiefs doing something that no other team has ever done in the history of the National Football League. And kind of like on Sunday's game, which I think it's what most games are determined by in the playoffs, is the battle that goes on between the trenches. We saw the Bills D line take advantage of the Ravens O line, and the Bills O line just completely suffocate the Ravens D line at times on Sunday. But the Chiefs obviously have a phenomenal trenches group themselves between that elite interior O line. The tackles are a little weaker, but they have been getting better tackle play as of late. And that D line, led by George Karlaftis and Chris Jones, has just been unbelievable for the past couple of seasons. And they got pressure, I believe, maybe 51% of the dropbacks on CJ Stroud on Saturday, sacking him 8 times. Obviously, the Bills have a little bit better of an O line, but
A little bit.
a lot of it. I mean,
There we go.
I was exaggerating, but
Absolutely. Good exaggeration.
Between the battle of the trenches, which side of this battle, being either the Bills D line against the Chiefs O line, or the Bills O line versus the Chiefs D line, is more important for this matchup? I'm gonna say the Bills D line against the Chiefs O line, because if you go back to the game in Orchard Park, whenever that was, week 11 or so, was it week 11?
Week 13, I
Maybe
think.
week 13. Okay, I was off by a lot on there. But anyways, whenever the Bills played the Chiefs in Buffalo, that game.
Week 11, you were right. You stood correct.
Okay.
Yep, week 11.
That week 11 matchup, when the Bills beat the Chiefs this season, the Bills D line played a critical part. And if you remember, that first the first series of the game, Greg Rousseau had a huge pressure, which ended up turning into an interception to, who was it again?
Taylor Rapp?
Yes, it was.
Well, it was Taylor
the
Rapp.
same guy who had that big interception on Sunday.
That's a wrap.
Exactly.
That's literally a wrap on the game right there.
But early on, the Bills created pressure on Mahomes. Later on in the game, they had another turnover on Mahomes to seal the deal, which has been really a key formula in this defense all season, which has been creating turnovers, which ultimately was a big reason they won that game on Sunday versus Baltimore. So if they're able to, keep it up in the turnover department,
take a look at the comment, Ben. David had a good point. If Mahomes is on the field, he can't score. Win the time of possession game. That's a very big one. And you said it because you're talking about the battle in the trenches.
Yes. Well, I'm speaking specifically when Mahomes is on the field. We have to get to him. We have to shut down that run game, which hasn't been the best this year, but you still know Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt are a very talented duo. And if you can get to Mahomes, that's going to force him to throw. But one thing we all know, having played him so many times in the playoffs and watching that Houston game, Mahomes tends to scramble a little bit more in these playoff games. So you gotta not let him, you can't give up outside contain. Otherwise, he'll take advantage of him. Keep him in the pocket. Don't let him run. And finally, you have to be ultra careful when hitting him, because you don't want to draw an unnecessary roughness, because the NFL likes protecting their golden boy. Let's just say it what it is. Say it what it is. But to me, I think the Bills D-line versus Chiefs O-line is more important, because obviously the Bills O-line is better. And even if the Chiefs get some pressure, I think Josh will still take advantage of it, and he could still escape that pressure.
Yeah.
For sure. But
it's an interesting battle.
Yes.
Honestly. because
Yes, it is.
I could agree with all your same points, Ben, but I could also still say the Bills' offensive line because the Bills need to establish a run game, which they
That is
couldn't
true.
do in their first matchup because you go back into the Week 11 game against the Chiefs. Josh Allen was the leading rusher for the Bills in that game,
Oh,
and
100%.
James Cook was only able to get 2.6 yards per carry in that game.
Right.
So if you're gonna look at this matchup, I think the Bills have to establish the run game, which feeds into David's point is to keep Mahomes off the field. How you're going to do that is long possessions, shorten how many possessions both teams get on offense, and this game will probably turn into a closer game because of that. But if you get the football last, you were able to establish the run game throughout the entire game, you could take that one last possession if you have it, go down the field effectively, and win the football game. What I would say in the Bills D line is getting pressure is also super important because against Baltimore, this Bills D line pressured Jackson 46% of the time on his dropbacks, and he went 8 of 14, 132 yards, and had that INT. When he wasn't blitzed, he was 10 for 11, 122 with 2 touchdowns. So generating pressure is important in this game because you
Hmm.
see the two differences between when Jackson was pressured and he wasn't pressured. You definitely you see there's a dramatic shift in the
Which would be
stats.
true for any quarterback.
Right.
But both of you have made good points. I mean, there's really nothing else you can add that wouldn't be just out there. But for me personally, it's going to be the Bills O line against the Chiefs D line because they have playmakers on the defensive line that can really ruin days. George Karlaftis and especially Chris Jones. The Bills really don't have that. The Bills have the better offensive line, though, and that is a very big thing to note because they can keep Allen clean in the pocket. And even then, Allen's got his legs. He can just run whenever he wants to, or he's going to just throw the ball away like he's done in the past. So the offensive line has to have a solid game against two really good pass rushers. That's going to be one of the biggest keys to winning this game, on top of hopefully they have another big game in blocking for James Cook. Pound the run, stop the run. The Tomlinism is still working, so keep pounding the Tomlinism. Literally run the ball with everyone you got, even Josh Allen. I mean, I know Josh didn't really run much against the Ravens. Paul, you were there. You could give us a better perspective of it from the stands compared to Ben and I, who are probably watching on television. But I mean, Josh didn't really run. He just kind of sat in the pocket. He looked like a traditional quarterback, believe it or not, at least from what I saw.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
only reason I said the Bills D line versus the Chiefs O line because I believe the Bills O line is obviously the stronger unit,
Hmm.
and I
Mhm.
believe obviously the D line is the weaker of the two, but the Chiefs O line
Absolutely.
also has some matchup problems that I believe the Bills can take advantage of, specifically Jawan Taylor and Joe Thuney,
Oh,
who is not
especially
a
Jawan Taylor.
especially Jawan Taylor, but Joe Thuney as well. As great as he is, 3-time Super Bowl champion offensive lineman. May, does he have 4? He may have 4. I don't know if he has 3 in Kansas City and 1 in New England, but I know he has at least 3 rings, Thuney. But he's not a traditional tackle, so that's obviously something the Bills could take advantage of. But let's now get into our X factor of the game, and to me, I still believe we're waiting for another breakout game ever since his injury, and he did not play in the first matchup against Kansas City, and we've heard about this narrative all offseason. I think he's going to want to prove the Chief haters wrong as well as the rest of the NFL as being the right pick. And how ironic and poetic justice would it be if Keon Coleman's the one who has the game-winning play to get the Bills into the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
So
God, that would
I
be so
think
nice.
I think to me, especially since he didn't play in this first matchup, and we haven't really seen Joe Brady really get into his playbook for Coleman this postseason, I think they're still saving Coleman's breakout game
Hmm.
against Kansas City specifically.
Oh yeah.
So for me, he's my X factor of this game. It's Keon Coleman. I'm hoping he can either make a big catch in the red zone or a catch down the sideline like he made in Detroit from that beautiful moon ball from Josh. But I'm going with Coleman as my X factor for this game.
You know what? Actually, that makes a lot of sense for another reason. Ben, you and I, we know who Keon is as a player. And you and I, we know that the Bills haven't really used him as that kind of player like we saw at FSU.
Right.
So Keon realistically could have that huge game like he's had many a times at FSU. I always go back to the game against Clemson where Keon literally reached up, jumped over a guy, and caught the ball with one hand. Like that was a pass right from the middle, down the middle of the field from Jordan Travis, and it was just absolutely incredible. Keon's probably going to have another game like that in the future, and probably against the Chiefs. But he's not my particular X factor player.
Okay. Who would
I
that
mean,
be?
he's a good choice, but he's not mine at the moment. So, if you really want to know who mine is, it's actually going to be Spencer Brown.
Okay, I like it.
You know what? You know what? No, not Spencer Brown. Everybody on the offensive line, all of them. Because how the
Interesting.
offensive line is able to open up the ground game for James Cook is going to be what decides this game. And it's not so much about keeping Josh Allen clean because he could just run. You know, he's got those legs. He'll just run away with the ball or he'll throw the ball away. He'll do whatever he's got to do to avoid the sack on his own. It's more about keeping the run game clear for James Cook, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, whoever you got running the ball back there. Shoot, even if you put Khalil Shakir, the Wildcat, had him run a play like that. So it's going to be the entirety of the offensive line for me that is going to show exactly what this team is capable of down the stretch and what's going to really be the key to winning the game. That's the biggest key for me is being able to run the ball as best as possible and keeping the ball out of Mahomes' hands. So anyway, on to you now, Paul.
I'm gonna go with the guy that came off an injury last year, and that we signed him to be the closer in these big games, and he wears the number 40, Von Miller. I think he has to have an important game this weekend against the Chiefs. We signed him for this moment. Get to the AFC Championship, play in big games, and help this D-line generate pressure on Patrick Mahomes.
The
But
big dog is
do
back
it on the biggest plays, on the biggest drives. Because
on the
we all
second
know,
biggest stage.
all three of us know here, and anyone who is watching, and all the people that are on, all the fans that are on Twitter know this. This game is going to be a one possession game, and whoever's going to get the football last probably wins
Mhm.
this football game. So
It's
if
not like
the
we have historical
Mahomes and the
precedent or anything.
Chiefs get that football back on their final drive, and that's the drive they could possibly win it, and it turns out to be a 4th and 5 inside the Bills zone, and they're almost to field goal range, and a field goal wins this football game, Mr. Von Miller better have that sack or generate some sort of pressure to be in there because we signed you for that. To be that big guy in the big moment to secure the Bills' victory and move us on to the Super Bowl. It's a lot to ask maybe because he is a little older and maybe some sort of expectations are lowered now. But you don't make the big money just to sit there and be non-existent for the entire game. Make an impact on this game.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Absolutely.
let's wrap up our preview now, each giving a key to victory. Obviously, this is well. I guess since the X factor is close enough, we'll discuss something else that we haven't yet talked about. Obviously, getting pressure on Mahomes, like we both mentioned. Me and Paul, but either between the O line talk or the Von Miller talk, is going to be a key factor. Running the ball, like Connor mentioned, is going to be a key factor.
With everyone.
And on the flip side, let me kind of change it to the inverse of that, which is stopping the run. If you can
Hmm.
stop the Chiefs' rushing attack, that's going to make them one dimensional. And yes, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, and Travis Kelsey can all burn you. Especially Kelsey, he just turns into a different player in the playoffs. But it's going to be a lot more difficult for the Chiefs to call their offense. They're always in third and long passing situations, especially if the defensive line could take advantage of that Chiefs O line. So for me,
Hmm.
I think it's imperative that the Bills control the line of scrimmage and stop the run.
Hey, it's the other half of the Tomlinism. Pound the run, stop the run. You
Yep.
just, I said one half, you said the other. So there
And
we are.
let's hear Let's hear each of your final keys to victory.
Well, we already said stop the run. Pound the run's been literally pounded into everybody's head by this point. So the last thing that I think will be a key to victory is what we've said, on top of playing the cleanest football you possibly can. Protect the freaking rock. Don't turn it over. Keep it safe. You know, hopefully Josh doesn't have to put on the cape, but let's hope that he doesn't have to put on the cape because of a very badly timed interception or a fumble by anybody. But that's really the last bit that there is to say, other than run the ball to keep Mahomes and the offense off the field, win the battle in the trenches, just protect the ball. I feel
Absolutely.
like we've seen that quite a bit in the Chiefs games during the regular season and in the playoffs. The Chiefs are winning these games by those little margins because they just happen to get a turnover right when they need it.
Yeah.
All right, Paul, let's hear it.
Going to give a quick point on your key, then I'm going to go into mine. As all four teams that are currently in the AFC and NFC Championship have combined for 0 turnovers. So if that doesn't give you a sign or a reason to be good at not at winning the turnover battle, that's one reason, because all four of those teams are currently one win away from the Super Bowl, and they haven't committed a turnover this season. So winning the turnover battle is
This
going to be
postseason, you
important.
mean?
Yeah,
Hmm.
this postseason.
All right, let's hear your key, and then we can get to our final game pick of the season.
Yep. The my it's going to be simple, and it's kind of already been talked about, but it's also going to be super important. Is time of possession. You got to win time of
Hmm.
possession, but it's not having the football for 45 minutes of the football game. It's what you do with the time of possession,
Hmm.
because the Bills went on 9 drives, excluding their final kneel downs against the Ravens. They went 5-9 on their drives. They had 3 punts and an interception. They had 4 touchdowns and a field goal. But you go back to the first game between these two teams, the Bills punted quite a few times in that game. Actually, that was uh, they punted quite a few times in the game against the Chiefs in the opening game. So winning the time of possession will be important, because Sal Capaccio posted this out earlier today. Said Kansas City ranks first in plays per drive, first in time of possession per drive, and eighth in percentage of drives that end in a touchdown. Sorry, don't end in a turnover. That's about 80% of the drives don't even end up in a turnover. That just shows you how efficient the Chiefs offense is, and how often they just keep the football away from the other team. I think the Bills would want to do the same thing. They don't want Mahomes on the field. Same thing for the Chiefs. The Chiefs don't want Allen on the field. So it's going to be a game of limited possessions. So when you get the football and you have it on your side, you have to score touchdowns, not field goals.
you
So I
got that.
expect the Bills to be have an aggressive offensive game plan in this game. If it's fourth and less than 2, go for it.
Yep. But you got to remember, he's been consistent. You can't just let him not get the points if you need them, because remember in the Baltimore game, Tyler Bass kicks the ball, gets the field goal, we go up by 8. That kind of stuff is going to matter even more in this game compared to the Ravens game, obviously.
So we
But
do have a game pick to get to.
we got
one game pick. But there's also another announcement that comes with this game pick because of this weekend. That Ben, you have clinched the game pick champion.
Oh, look at that. He's the one that knows the ball.
Let's go. And yeah, I mean, I kind of get a sweat-free pick for our final game pick.
Yeah, we all do.
But I would like to see if I could reach it to 60. So I think that would be
One
cool.
more way.
Now that I put that goal, I was wanting to get spicy because, obviously we're gonna pick this NFC Championship game, and it's tough to pick against this Washington team. Like, there just feels like there's something special about it, something special in the air with them.
They're the perfect Cinderella story.
They are a perfect Cinderella story, and like I said earlier in the show, both NFC teams kind of have some history that they could be making for their respective franchises as well, but we've never seen a rookie quarterback start in the Super Bowl, which would be historical. That being said, as great as I love this Washington Cinderella story, my heart says Washington because that's a team I would rather face in the Super Bowl. But this Philadelphia team, it just seems like they're on another level. And even if Detroit survived on Sunday, I don't know if they were getting past this Philly team. And they faced a little bit of adversity themselves, but they still found a way. That defense has really, gone to another level. The second half of the season, Saquon Barkley is playing at an MVP level, and they're at home. They know Washington well, playing in their division, and I get it. Washington ultimately beat them in their last matchup, but if you go back to that game, Jalen Hurts got hurt, which is kind of like a pun almost.
An unfortunate pun.
It is, but not only that, Kenny Pickett actually put them in position to win that game before Devonta Smith dropped a wide open pass on a third down that would have ran out the clock, and that gave a sliver of hope for Washington to drive down the field. They did an improbable comeback and ended up winning that game. But if one of their all-star receivers made a play, they would have won that game with Kenny Pickett, no less. So I'm going with Philly. I don't really want them to win, but I think that's who's going to win ultimately.
Yeah, and that's actually the exact same way I was going to take it, but I am going to be a little bit different about it because to me, this Washington Commanders team really feels like an absolute carbon copy of the 2019 Tennessee Titans. They just barely made the playoffs. They wind up winning the wild card and divisional round games that no one thought they'd win, and they wind up in the championship game only to get smoked by the eventual Super Bowl contender. I feel like this Washington team is the exact same. They beat the Buccaneers, which not many people thought they would. Then they beat the Lions, which no one thought they would. So the Cinderella story has been great, but ultimately and unfortunately, I think it is going to stop here. I'm taking the Eagles to win, even though personally, like I said, I think we'd all rather see Washington win, but I still think Philly is the better team and they're going to take care of business. Just another repeat of 2019, except on the NFC side. And before Paul makes his pick, fun fact, no matter who wins this game between the Commanders or Eagles, neither hypothetically will be favorites in the Super Bowl. From what I understand, and I saw something earlier this morning about it, if the Commanders win this game, they will be 4.5-point underdogs against either against either Buffalo or Kansas City. If Philadelphia wins, they will be 1.5-point underdogs against either Buffalo or Kansas City for the Super Bowl. So no way you can make the NFC team the favorite, heaven forbid, unless something happens in the AFC Championship to a key player, which we hope that does not happen. But I figured, seeing as we hadn't said it, it would be fun to know that neither of these two teams will be the favorite in the Super Bowl, no matter who they face. So both Ben and I are taking Philly. Paul, are you going to be the one to take the Commanders, or are you going to make it a clean sweep for our final game pick of the year?
Because you two are going with Philly, I'm going to say screw it. I'm just going to take Washington just
There
for
we
the
go.
theater.
I
Just
love
for
it.
the theater. And also just look at Jaden Daniels. He doesn't feel like a regular rookie quarterback in this
No,
setting.
this
Like,
is not the
he's
same.
mature
This is not
about
like
it.
CJ Stroud. No way.
He's mature about it. He has the team built in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
He has the wide receivers. He has the offensive line. And he has himself making big plays in big moments. Yes, if the Lions were healthy and didn't have missing almost their entire defense and
Aiden
their
Hutchinson
entire
being the big one.
secondary, the game is probably different
Mm-hmm.
and it's probably closer and less high scoring. But I still think the Commanders could have beat that Lions team if they were still at full strength because who is their quarterback? Jaden Daniels. He's not no ordinary rookie
Mm-hmm.
quarterback in these situations, and I think he can lead the Washington Commanders, who don't have to travel far away for their NFC Championship game, and they know this opponent. They're playing them for the third time. Brings up all the juices for a potential
Mm-hmm.
upset. I think Philly has a lot of manpower. They're a lot more experienced than the Commanders. But I said that last week, and Washington came in and boat raced the Lions. So why not go Commanders?
Hey, I like it. I mean, the world wants to see a Bills Commanders Super Bowl. Let's be completely honest with ourselves. And if the NFL wants to get those watch numbers up and make some money, I think they want to find whatever way possible to make sure Bills Commanders is the Super Bowl, because that one will be the one with the most turnout, I promise. Bills Eagles would be good too. But if it's Chiefs Eagles,
I'm not
nobody's watching that.
I'm not.
Nobody's watching that. I mean, there will be the people that watch, obviously, just in small pockets of Kansas City and Philadelphia. No one else in the world's going to even care. So
You want a
one of the
nugget.
two.
But either way, let's manifest a Bills Super Bowl.
Yes.
Their first trip since the late 90s, and
Mm-hmm.
we can actually give a Bills Super Bowl preview on our show the next couple of weeks. So that would be fun. And honestly, if it does happen, we still have 2 weeks till the Super Bowl. It would be fun to get a guest from either Washington or Philly.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not next week, but for the week after, leading up to the Super Bowl week. Next week, we could do something maybe, obviously we want to be recapping the AFC Championship game, but we still have a little bit more time. Maybe we look forward to the Super Bowl a little bit, talk about the NFC Championship, the matchup. Maybe we'll do one more game pick and we'll pick the Pro Bowl just for fun. Maybe we'll talk about some of the coaching decisions and stuff, because we talked a little bit about Ben Johnson earlier, but we haven't really discussed the NFL coaching carousel. And then we could also, preview the offseason a little bit before the season wraps up. So obviously we don't want to be mourning of the Bills season ending. So hopefully the Bills win on Sunday. We're able to do this just wacky show next week and pick the Pro Bowl, talk about some other fun topics, and then we'll have our big Super Bowl preview in a couple of weeks from now. But that should wrap up the show tonight. And go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills. Let's get this dub.